Yeah, not too bad. There's no matches currently, so we're just watching it and planning and so on. So no heat yet on us. The games only start for us a little bit later. Yeah, it's been interesting to watch the games unfold, especially between the South African conferences. So not too much pressure currently on us.
Any talking points from those games? Anything you picked up that has piqued your interest?
Yeah, very much in terms of, we had obviously some players of national interest which we currently look at in terms of the World Cup and obviously the Rugby Championships, and we were having our alignment camps as we call them, and this last 3 days we had our first one. So we're consistently monitoring players that's in the mix, and obviously when you watch the matches, you do fundamental analysis but also game plan and strategy analysis, and I must say there's a different shift this year. I think last year you saw a lot of attacking, running rugby from our franchises, and it feels for me some of the guys are really grabbing the test match mold, if I can call it that way, in trying to apply a lot of pressure through territory and tactical game, which is sometimes for a national coach, it's sometimes a positive, where it's not just a free-flowing running game. But then again, it's early season, and I guess the game will evolve as the season goes on.
How much of that is down to you yourself, Rassie, in terms of your communication with the Super Rugby coaches and the way they're going about their business? Is there any contribution from you in terms of how you'd like to see them play?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, to be honest, Jacques has been going around quite often to most of the friends. Jacques Ninaber, the defence coach, he also does a lot of our kicking game, our exit game, and I've been to all the franchises. I must say the contracting model the last 2, 3, 4 weeks has really taken up quite a bit of my time in terms of that. I haven't been going around as much as I've planned in the beginning of the season, but I guess that will start happening now. We're only in round 3 of Super Rugby. But I guess with having a lot of the players in the mix with us last year, there were a lot of guys that played Springbok rugby from the first Wales Test match to the last Wales Test match. There were quite a lot of Springboks involved. And I guess what we're trying to do at Springbok levels does get filtered down through those players. And those players know what we're expecting from them, what they must be able to do when they get to us. And yes, we do share a lot of stuff with the franchise coaches, but they all have their own flavor, especially when it comes to the tactical game, and you don't want to take that away. But there's certainly some stuff flowing through from the national side, and vice versa. We're trying to incorporate some. So it's good to see that they take some of our stuff, use it, and we take some of their stuff and use that.
Specifically, what's impressed you? I mean, you speak about improvements, kicking on the balls, just an example, but what specifically has impressed you?
Yeah, I think what you said there, I don't want to hop on kicking games here, but you think World Cups, you just can take it right through to the first World Cup, from Joel's drop goal to Stephen Largham's drop goal, which went through my hands when we were in the quarterfinal, to Johnny Wilkinson's drop goal, to Leon McDonald's, what's his name? Stephen Donalds's penalties against France. World Cup's never been won by 8 tries. It's always been high pressure, games which at the end of the game it's a penalty here or a drop goal there. And I guess if you don't start accepting that and think it's going to be this free-flowing World Cup, and you want to change guys' mindset in terms of how important penalties, discipline, territory, kicking game, defense, and by all means attack and scoring tries on set phases. I think if you want to install that all of a sudden when you go into test match weeks, that will be too late. So I think the players understand that, and they also want to prove that they can play that type of game. So for me, the way the Bulls went around about their business in the first round and the third round was very impressive. I think the way the Lions handled the away game against the Jaguars was really impressive. And then again, obviously the Bulls struggled to replicate that when they went away from home, and the Lions, struggled this last game. The Sharks were really clinical in the first 2 games, and then the last game I thought, the Stormers got it right tactically. So yeah, it's suddenly this game where it isn't all about X factor and all about a brilliant moment. It's almost like the teams are trying to squeeze tactically results out of one another, and to be honest with you, I enjoy that.
Rassie, you touched on the contracting system. You just clear that up first. I mean, we saw there were numbers of dozens of players, and there was a number of 75. Can you just clear up what sort of number are you looking at players in that players of national interest group?
Yeah, Yeah, I think if I can spend a few minutes on this, and you're more than welcome to ask me a few other questions if I don't answer all your questions in my first go. I think obviously the first thing that one must realize, why did we make this announcement? I think succession planning in South Africa is something currently that we struggle to do, just because it's cutthroat. You're not always sure how many players you're going to lose at the end of this year, just because we're competing with a massive exchange rate. And with clubs on the other side who doesn't always have a business model, it's a rich owner who has a lot of money, and you can spend that money if that player is worth it or not. And if we try and compete with that all the time, we'll just exhaust our budget, and our succession planning on this side will just be impossible. So the first thing is trying to keep our, if we can call it, our marquee players, our big name players here. We just can't bat in that area anymore. Those guys just have too much money, and I think the more we're trying to talk around that, the more we just getting ourselves more into a corner. Because if we want to keep players for 8, 9, 10 million rand here, and you keep 4 players here, you're close to 40 million rand, and some of our unions' budgets are 60 million. So you give money to 4 players, and then still you must try and build a squad around that, and then 1 or 2 of those players gets injured, and half your budget's gone. So the return, first of all, the tripartite agreement helped us to understand that we can work together in terms of player management, playing minutes, player welfare, sharing medical records, the communication between franchises. I think if the tripartite agreement wasn't there, we would have never been able to work together like we're doing currently. Now we see we can do that. Now we went to the route and say, guys, we're not going to bat against these big guys anymore. We can't afford them. We're going to try and spread our money through more players. What does that mean? If a big name player now leaves, his money comes available, and we start putting it into the bottom of our system, the 3rd choice, the 4th choice, the 2nd choice, the 1st choice. If that big player accepts the smaller offer we're giving now, we might have 5 less guys that we sign at the bottom, if you understand what I'm saying. So that's why it's difficult to put a number on it. We'll start with our tripartite players. I've already sat with 7 or 8 of them, made them offers, see if they accept it. If they don't accept it, that money gets put back into the system, into younger guys, the next generation guys. And so that's why it's difficult to put a number. Until you know how many of the top guys are accepting and taking chunks of money on top, you don't know how much you're going to put back into the bottom. So that's why sometimes you hear 40, sometimes you hear 60. It just depends on how many of your big name players are you going to lose to 10, 12, 13 million in clubs, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But you can please ask me more about that. I'll give more
And obviously, you and your national selectors will be involved in identifying those players that will be in that of national interest.
Yes, obviously you start on Celestia, who's our first choice 30, and Celestia, hopefully we can try and sign all of them, and all of them want to stay here, and all of them will take less money and stay in South Africa, but that's not living in the real world. And then if you see out of those 30, 18 signed and 12 didn't, for example, what are we going to do with that money if the 12 is not here? Right, we can sign another few youngsters, and that's how we'll filter the money back into that. Yes, so obviously there's the ranking system, but the ranking system obviously every weekend it can change, but from number 1 to 3 it shouldn't change radically, and that's where our succession planning, working closely with what does the bull succession planning look like, what does the Sharks, what does the Lions, the Cheetahs, the Pumas, what does our succession planning looks like, and how does that flow into one another. You might invest into a guy who plays with the Cheetahs who's 4th choice, but in 2023 he might be 1st choice, but we can keep him now in the system already. So listen, we're only going to probably reap the benefits from this in 2-3 years time, and take a bit of a knock now post World Cup, but you anyway take a knock after the World Cup.
Rassie, just why the sudden emphasis on Regulation 9? I mean, it's been there forever, but it sounds like you reading that release last week, it sounds like you're going to play a bit more hardball with the clubs on Regulation 9.
Yeah, and it's not at all a thing that we are misusing Regulation 9. Regulation 9 is there to protect, if you take Fiji, their players play all over the world. So if the Fijians who play the different rich clubs in France and England and so on, if their players doesn't get released for national duty, Fiji won't be a competitive nation and won't be able to go to the World Cup, because if their clubs stop paying them when they go to the World Cup, they won't have a competitive team at the World Cup. So Regulation 9 is there to make sure that all countries can compete and stay relevant on the world scene. And unfortunately, with our exchange rate, we're one of those countries now. So Regulation 9 is there also to protect South Africa. So the clear guidelines of Regulation 9 is pretty simple. You know, there's windows where you can play test match rugby. Obviously, that's at this stage 12, but then there's also 12 weeks, and there's obviously windows where you can have camps, like 3-day camps, mid-season, or and all that we did now is actually said, guys, up until now we've been give and take, because there's personalities in his lives and his families on the other side. You know, Faf is playing for Sale. We didn't pick him 2-3 years ago. He left. He thought he was done. Now we're selecting him all of a sudden. You don't want to upset his relationship with his club owner. But we're being proactive now and saying, listen, yeah, from 2020, we're giving you time now. We're telling you guys, from 2020, we're going to enforce Regulation 9, because we've made a decision now. We can't bat at that level. We can't pay people at that level. And, so just know now, from 2020, we're going to do that. That gives the club who signs the player time to consider, will it be worth me signing that player? That will give the player time to say, listen, do I want to go there? Do I actually want to retire from international rugby? Do I actually pick money now where I am in my career above playing for the Springboks? Some players might be there in their career. So it's actually just being proactive and saying from 2020 we're going to do that. Where we don't all of a sudden now tell a club, we've been doing it like this, now we're going to enforce it. We're just being proactive and warning. It's not playing hardball. It's just we've made a decision to do that now.
And I would imagine you've got a few agents complaining to you, because I guess it would make some top South African players less attractive if they're going to only play 15 games for, say, a French club as opposed to 25 or 30, if you enforce Regulation 9 completely.
Look, we're definitely going to enforce Regulation 9, and that's why we're saying it's not a threat. It's just a reality. I'll tell you why also, because normally what happens, if you don't mind me explaining this, because I think it's important. I think the people should understand that, and the fans should understand that. So say a player's first choice in his position, and the other player's second choice in that same position. If the first choice player moves on and we stop selecting him, this player is second choice. Now all of a sudden South Africa start earning the money of that first choice player. And he's not yet there. He shouldn't be on that money yet, because he's still second choice. So currently, if you keep that guy overseas and you say he can come back, the player is still on a second choice salary, and that's how we can internally regulate our market, which is totally inflated now. I mean, we are currently paying in the league of French clubs. We are currently paying in the league of Premiership clubs. We're paying money for teams which we can't afford, and I think that's irresponsible. I think we can't afford it, and we're actually giving players false hope and giving them crazy money for where they're not yet. In the same instance, you also don't want to incentivize players to leave. People might say you're incentivizing players to leave. No, we're not. You're still going to have the player here more available, having him in alignment camp. So the guy on that side still have to perform, still have to play well, and at the end of the day, then he will only get picked for South Africa.
And last one from me on this, just how do you police it? For instance, I know in football, often when it's international week, suddenly a player's got a groin strain or a hamstring, and he's not released. Now, how would you sort of police that kind of thing doesn't start happening when the French club says, oh no, player X has pulled his groin, and then 2 weeks later he's fine to play club rugby again? How do you monitor that?
Well, the only thing is he can't also then play for his club, because he's got an injury then. So if he's got an injury, then he also can't play for his club. So then whenever he's fit again, you never just call a player up for a week. It's either for the Rugby Championships or for the June Test matches or for the end of year tour. So if a player gets injured, then he must be injured for 3 weeks. So you can call him up and say he's got a groin injury or whatever. The next week he can't play for his club still, because then you can still draft him in. So I guess listen, if people want to really misuse the system or lie about it, but that's where the player must come to the fore. And that's almost for me like a natural filtering system. Who's really desperate to play for South Africa still? If a player is going to be part of that and buy into that, then you actually know this player doesn't really want to play for South Africa, and then you just don't pick him. And I guess some players will have to make that call. Where are they in their career? Because I think the fans out there would want the guys to play South Africa who's keen and want to play for South Africa. And I guess that will be a natural selection filter, to call it that way.
Sorry, Rassie.
No problem.
Interrupt you. This past weekend now, obviously with the injury to Lewis being very unfortunate, and it's interesting, just following the New Zealand press. They've got
Yes,
and are we kind of protecting our players from injury?
Yes, we've got with all the players that are currently on our radar. We went and sat with each franchise and each head coach. We've worked out a player management plan with each player in terms of game minutes, in terms of regeneration weeks, booster weeks, where how many weeks a player should rest, what is the work counts in the weeks where you must actually regenerate. So in terms of work ons, or is it speed, is it endurance, is it, so we've sat with every single coach about every single player who's possibly on the radar, and at this stage every single coach has worked with us, and obviously I think when the pressure is on and when it comes to playoff matches and there's been a few injuries, I think that's where we'll be tested in the system. But there hasn't been one coach who said no, we weren't going to do that. All of them back us in terms of our World Cup planning. So yes, we've done that. We're only in round 3, and the Warren got injured not because he's overplayed. Lewitt got injured not because he's overplayed. So I guess when we get to round 7, 8, we'll see what players are overplayed. But no, there's a game management plan in terms of minutes, what weeks they must be off, and all, as far as I understand, they all buy in, and at this stage they're all adhering to that, so that's great.
Rassie, there's been a lot of talk from World Rugby's World League idea.
Yeah.
I mean, Johnny Sexton, Owen Paddle, they've spoken out. Bill Bowman, Brett Gosper, they've said their piece, but there's been nothing from SA Rugby.
Yeah.
What's SA Rugby stance, position on this whole matter?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm flat out honest now with you. We had the Stormers alignment camp now. My attention was fully there. I did last week have a brief discussion with, with some of our role players and decision makers who's involved there. I had my brief inputs there in terms of how I understand it. I think there's so many nuts and bolts that must be put together and worked out there. I understand how many challenges there are and what they're trying to achieve, and I think it's wonderful what they're trying to achieve, to get a global season, and eventually I think world rankings will almost be more relevant in terms of how world rankings work currently, because sometimes you don't play a game and you go up and down in world rankings and you're not sure where you are, number 1, number 5, number 6. So I can understand where they're going with it, and there's a lot of things that make sense to me. I don't have the answers and all the challenges, so I think for me commenting right now, I might just get into trouble because I just don't know all the detail.
Rassie, can you just tell us about the Stormers alignment camp? How many players, how long has it been, and what sort of things were you trying to get across?
Yeah, we call it alignment camps just because, they're playing for the different franchises currently, and obviously they got a way of doing things then, game plans, and how they do a week program, and when do they train, and conditioning, and if you only get them in just 2 weeks before the first rugby championship game, there's so many things that you must get into the head, not just game plan wise, but just in terms of, there's a lot of things. Obviously we shared a lot of World Cup plans in terms of how many games we're going to play, what's our plans in the rugby championships, when we go to the World Cup, what can you expect, give them feedback how we plan the World Cup in terms of traveling, and, families and those kind of things. So a lot of info was given in terms of that. A lot of individual requirements from players in terms of conditioning, fundamentals, diets, those kind of things, fitness testing. Then some tactical things that we look at whilst they're playing for their franchises. And then obviously what's the way forward and how we communicate to one another, how we stay in touch with one another until the next alignment camp. So it's just getting the ball rolling to know that while you're doing your franchise stuff, we stay in touch and you aligned on how we see the way forward.
How many players were there?
We just invited 10 of the Stormers players, and we almost made a conscious decision that it's very tough to play yourself in contention in the first 2-3 rounds. So we almost went and said, listen, with the guys that were in the mix last year that worked with us, let's just first get them in. But we contacted all the others and say, listen, we just don't want 15, 16 guys here. So we started with smaller groups. Next week we have the Bulls and the Sharks. They're playing one another. We have that one in Pretoria on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And again, it will be approximately 20 players in total. And not because they're the only players in contention. We just want to get the ball rolling in terms of aligning.
Rassie, there's a few of us who follow the Proteas who are a little bit concerned at the moment that 4 ODIs out for the World Cup, they still seem to be experimenting with their best 11. When you play Rugby Championship this year, can we expect to see a side that you feel that in your mind will be the side we see at the World Cup, and what percentage of that squad are you kind of settled on at the moment already?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was quite clear last year, guys. There was 3 things we tried to achieve in 18 test matches. It was, listen, let's try and win against decent teams and try and understand that we can beat quality teams and not just average teams. So we wanted to win, but at the same time we said, listen, yeah, let's work on transformation, let's build some squad depth, and let's get some experience under our belt. That was a clear strategic thinking about a lot of our team selections and the way we planned the whole season, from the first Wales Test match to the first England Test match, right through to the last Wales Test match. So that was last year. This year, there's only one strategic goal, and that's the World Cup. You know, so going into Rugby Championships, we play 4 test matches. The first 3 count for Rugby Championships, and the last one don't. So, you know, obviously the first thing, we would love to win the Rugby Championship. So we'll select teams to try and win the Rugby Championship, and then probably the last test match against Argentina, depending where we are. You know, you don't want, if you're on the roll and you have form, you want to keep that. If you're not on the roll and you want to get back to winning ways, you might tackle that last Argentina game totally different. But at this stage, you know, we see that first game against Australia as hell of important. The Wellington Test match away is in Wellington again. You know, that will be an important one for us to set the tone how we go to Japan. And then the last Argentina Test match might be the decider to see if we can win the Rugby Championship. So at this stage, we definitely have the World Cup in our mind, but I'll probably see us picking our best possible side for those 4 test matches. Maybe the last Argentina Test match, depending on injuries and how our form are and what we want to achieve out of that one. Maybe we might play around a little bit there.
And percentage-wise, in terms of the guys you know that are going to the World Cup at the moment, what would you?
You know, I think the reality is that, you know, there's only 4 test matches. I know we've got the Japan Test match, which is an extra one, but we're on the plane already then. You know, we're on the plane and play Japan there, so you can't really then send guys back and try things there. So the moment you're on the plane, play Japan, we'll probably play our best team against Japan, because 2 weeks later we play against the All Blacks, because that'll be probably your dress rehearsal for the All Blacks Test match. So you got 4 test matches prior to the World Cup where you can get guys into the system. So it will probably be tough for guys only play 1 or 2 test matches to now play himself. You'll have to play all 4 test matches, or you'll have to have a lot of injuries in one position for a guy to quickly now play him into it. You know, so I would probably say 80% of the squad is probably pretty much settled. But then, you know, as we saw with Luat this weekend and Warren being out, you know, and then a guy can just, like Frans Steyn in 2007, just knock down the door totally and just say, yeah, I can win you a World Cup. So probably saying 70-80% is got a good chance, but some guys can knock down the door.
But I see you touched on transformation. You clear that up for us. I mean, everybody talks about 50%. How do you see it, and what is your plans for that?
Yeah, it's so nice that we can start openly talk about transformation, you know, and talk about it and not always talk around it. Yeah, you know, the as I said last year, clearly, I thought we did better in transformation. You know, I think there's some clear things that we did well in terms of giving new guys opportunity and, you know, getting guys like Apua becoming Young Player of the Year. There's so many positives around that, but still, you know, the target of 45 we didn't achieve. And obviously it's 50 this year. And I think we have to be clear about that. 50 is an average of players playing over the year for us in terms of the match day 23. You know? So even selecting a World Cup squad out of 31 is not to say 14 and a half. What do you say? It must be must be 15 and a half. Sorry, I'm from the Spats High School. So 15 and a half must be players of colour. You know, it's an average of players in your match day 23 over the amount of test matches. You know, and I really believe with what we've given exposure to players last year, we'll be able to get to that. I don't think people must expect us to pick 16 players out of the 31 or 15. You know, we might pick 13 or 12 or 17, you know, depending on form and how players are. But as an average of match day 23s over the test matches in the year. And with that, and I think that's the reason why we had the extra Wales test match. That's why sometimes we, experimented at test match level with some players in certain positions. That's why we blooded some guys a little bit slower than other guys, with knowing that this year we will have to have a bigger pool to pick from. And I think already you can see, when you look at the Sharks team, when you look at the Lions team last year in the Currie Cup, and even Apiwe sitting on the bench, and Scotland starting, and Fussy playing, and there's so many positive things that happen out there. And yes, we might, if we have a few injuries, have a challenge. But I think the pool of players we have there, we can get to that target.
Rassie, you must be quite chuffed and in a way vindicated after the way Skull Press played on the weekend.
Yeah, Stephen, I think sometimes people think when the supporters and you guys don't agree with us, we want to be right in a way. We just want to get it right for us to all be happy and us to win. So, as I said last year, I really think what Skull brings to the party is a lot of mentorship, sometimes for other players. So when he does well, it's great, not because somebody is right, it's because we have a better chance of winning. But listen, it's the third game of Super Rugby. He's an old guy, he all the body held up, they're playing a lot of tough matches. He's got a young hooker who's backing him up. They will have to manage him well. Akker did really well the first two games. So it's nice to have 4 hookers in contention, and all of them, are playing well. It's for us. It's not to be right for me to prove anybody wrong. It's nice to start building that depth, which we're going to need in the World Cup here.
Rassie, is there a specific position where you have some concerns that the depth might not be enough, or that there's issues?
No, there's definitely. I think it's quite clear that Faf and Ambrose are probably 2 nines that really everybody can see is in the contention for going to the World Cup. I think between Ivan, Ross, Louis, Kobus Reinach, all of those guys. Everybody knows you have to take three scrum-offs to a World Cup, and we're not quite settled on a few positions, with Luet being out as the 5 lock now for a couple of months. We all know Frank has really done well for us. As a matter of fact, Luet only played in 1 game for us last year, so we performed last year was most of the time anyway with Franco. So there's a few positions like everywhere else in the world. We 1 injury away from really being in trouble, but then all of a sudden somebody else takes a position. So we're quite settled in most of it. I know where we're going, and I know where we're in trouble, but already in this first 2 rounds, there's a few guys like, I think Ambrose really played well. And last year he didn't get game time in the first 5-6 rounds. So let's see here by around 6-7, and then we'll make calls on that.
Rassie, you've got an opponent currently playing in Italy, and potential quarterfinalist opponents in Scotland and Ireland at the Six Nations. And is there any particular takeouts from the current Six Nations after 3 rounds for you?
Yes, I definitely think, and it's not a cliche. I think teams 1 to 5, with us being 5, and you can include Scotland as 6. I think on the day really they can beat one another. I think if Scotland have their first choice 15 available with not a lot of injuries on the day, they're really dangerous. We all know what other French are in World Cup years. We all know Ireland is number 2 in the world, and Wales has gone from 6 in the world last year to 2 in the world currently. And the way Warren Gatland has built that squad, obviously we're going to play Scotland or Ireland in the quarterfinal if we do well in the pool stages. And yes, coaching in Ireland, I pretty much know what to expect from Ireland. Not that would make it easier, actually makes me more nervous. What we're going to get from them there. And then from Scotland, we only beat them by 6 points at Murrayfield, and I think they maybe have a smaller player base, so I think injuries will much quicker cause havoc with them. But when they have their first choice available, so I coached in that league for 2 years, so those teams we know pretty well, and it will be tough if we proceed how we would through pool stages. Those will be 2 tough matches.
And just on the World Cup, it's almost like an away tournament for everyone, really. I mean, we've always had a clear sort of home favourite who's one of the top tier rugby nations. This year, the first time Japan, with all respect, are not a one of the tier 1 nation. So does that make it a slightly different tournament, a more neutral tournament?
shit, we must be so nervous not to say that about Japan. You know what happened in the previous World Cup. So no, definitely. I think you're spot on, and also the conditions. I don't think it favors somebody specific. Maybe the players, the Sharks players, are used to that kind of weather. I think we might have guys like Jesse who's played there, and a few of the guys has played in Japan. That helps a lot. But yes, I think you're right. There's not a team that can say, listen, here, we are comfortable here. We know what it's like here. So it's going to be interesting. We've obviously, our manager, our operational head is currently there. I've been myself there looking at the facilities. I think we've done our recce's pretty intensive, and we know where we are, what we're going to do, the hotels, the planning. I really think we've planned it out to the second and minute. I'm really excited about, and I think that so is the same as New Zealand and all the other teams has done it. But it is definitely I don't know if uncharted is the right word, but it's unfamiliar territory for us. It's not like we're all going to Scotland and playing there, or to France. So it's really neutral this year.
Rassie, management-wise, your management team, are you still looking for additions to your management team?
Yes, obviously, as I think Hendrik reported this weekend, I think there's definitely a gap, and I probably realized it in the Barbarian week when I had some good one-on-one with players, or opportunity to have good one-on-one with players when I coached the South African Barbarian team against Argentina. Is that there are some players in terms of load management, and when I talk, I'm not talking training minutes and gym minutes, and I'm talking about from public appearances to, there's so many things that players currently do that's non-on-field or rugby-related things, and we've had a good chat to my players, the Players Association, and said to them, listen, can't we take hands on this and see how we can make it work to make sure that the players are optimum focused and ready for playing and coaching and really performing on the field. So we're currently in discussions with them. It hasn't been finalized, and hopefully we can get to an answer on that really quickly to see how we can work together with them, getting somebody on the management team to help us get the best out of the players.
Rassie, just changing topic again. There's obviously been a strategic shift with this contracting model, but I get the sense that the Kings and the Cheetahs have kind of been left out to dry in a very good league in the top 14. What is the plan with those two franchises?
Yeah, no, a very valid question, and I don't think it's a matter of left out to dry. It might look like that, and I can understand why you say that. I think the first 2 years, just think first of all from a player's perspective. You grow up in South Africa. Normally, December you go to Jeffreys Bay and have a good holiday. Now you go December, you train through that, you fly over, you don't have Christmas, you play in the heat and you fly. It's just the first thing you have to reset the way your season works. Your contracting is totally different. It's from June to June. It's not from October till November till October. So it's going to take a cycle of 2 until you just get your contracting system right. So that's the one part. Then the second part is then you got to get used to the traveling, and sometimes playing 9 and 10 and 11 o'clock at night, to put it that way, 10 o'clock at night. Then having interpretations of a Scottish referee, English, Welsh referee, then playing on artificial pitches. There's so many different things that you get used to. It's much more different tactical game there. It's not this X factor on the second, changing the game around. It's squeezing out the result. It's playing territory. It's playing possession. It's very much like Test match rugby, and you're playing against teams who's been doing it for years. So I think that's the first thing. Players and coaches and management are not just going to adapt like that. It certainly caught me when I went over to Munster and coached there. I had to adapt to this. So that's the first thing. The second thing, obviously, for us, and this is where this whole succession planning thing, which I hope we tomorrow have a meeting with all the CEOs, the franchise CEOs at Oliver Tambo in Joburg, where we're going to discuss succession planning is something on the agenda, contracting, South African side of money, are we going to try and invest that? It's not just going to be in the 14 top Springboks, but maybe in 1 or 2 or 3 of the Kings players, or 1 or 2 or 4 of the Cheetah players, and how we can help spreading the talent so that all the players, there's not 150 sitting at one Super Rugby franchise, but that overflow actually gets utilized. So we are having plans, the growing pains in terms of getting that implemented is just what I try to mention in terms of the calendar and the mindset and the flow of things. So I can tell you, I know Pro 14 in a lot of instances there's different challenges to Super Rugby, but it's really a tough competition. The nice thing for those two teams, if a player does well, then he'll probably do pretty well at Test match rugby. But if he suffers there, you also know he's going to suffer at Test match rugby. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for them. But it's a hell of a tough competition.
Lloyd, so we'll take Lloyd in English and then we go to Coach Afrikaans.
Rassie, just on that succession plan, we know that your role as head coach is up until 2019, and from 2020 you'd like to go into your director of rugby role.
Yeah.
How involved are you in identifying a head coach for 2020? Is there anyone that you have identified, and when does that process begin?
Yeah, well, it's actually begun in my head, and I've shared some ideas with the steering committee I report to, and certainly a few names that we've bounced around. And look, to be honest with you, if we can find a way to sort out the succession planning in terms of players in South Africa and get this contracting models nice and sorted, I think the next step will probably be okay, let's get a proper succession planning for coaches in place. Because the moment you got a succession planning for players in place, you know how that talks to the competitions we're playing. Like, even the junior structured competitions has already changed for us to have a better flow and less professional rugby players. So the moment you have less professional rugby players, you'll probably need less coaches, but you can start the planning of coaches better. You can start the planning of black coaches better, because that's one of the things, the transformation we must talk to. So I think the moment you get the players and succession planning right and the competitions they must play in, then you can have not just the succession planning of coaches through the different structures, and the succession planning to national level, to junior Springboks, sevens, and to the Springbok team eventually. So we're taking it bit by bit, but yes, I've been playing around in my head and with a few ideas, but I will be very stupid to mention it here right now. It wouldn't be the right
Thanks,
place.
Rassie. Craig, so waar ga je begin?
Okay, Rassie, just 3 questions. We just need some Afrikaans.
Yes, sure.
Soundbites for TV. Just to start off with about this alignment camp for the Stormers, just in Afrikaans.
Yeah.
What was discussed, and just your future plans with the other alignment
Ja.
in that area?
Ja, die beleidingskamp is die regte woord is. Het is maar van laas jaar af gedoen, en die groot ding is maar om beleiding te kry. Ouens speel nou vir hulle franchises, hulle het 'n sekere manier van dinge doen daar. Jy weet, 'n manier, hulle weekprogram is dalk 'n maandag, dinsdag, donderdag. Ons mag dit dalk by die bokke doen maandag, dinsdag, woensdag. So ons deel idees soos daai. Ons het baie inligting in terme van die Wêreldbeker. Hoe beplan ons vir die Wêreldbeker? Wanneer is ons waar? Wanneer is ons kamp? Wanneer gaan ons waar in kamp wees? Hoeveel spelers vat ons? Wat is ons beplanning by die rugby kampioenskap? En net sodat die speler sy beplanning, indien hy die Wêreldbeker span of die rugby kampioenskap span maak, dat die speler sy jaar kan begin beplan. Obviously, so dis baie inligting wat deurgegee is. Baie ook spesifiek individuele fundamentals van spelers wat ons met hulle gedeel het, hoe ons voel waar hulle huidiglik is. En dan het ons ook 'n bietjie taktiek begin bespreek in terme van hoe ons gaan speel op en van die veld af. En dan wat is die pad vorentoe? Hoe gaan ons hulle monitor en heeltyd in kontak bly met hulle? En so gaan ons dieselfde doen volgende naweek met die Bulls en die Sharks, en 'n week daarna saam met die Lions. Ons doen dit in al die baie weke waar hulle 'n loslootjie het. So ons gaan nie op die veld nie, ons sit hier gesit as a matter of fact in hierdie gebou vandag, en ons gaan dieselfde doen volgende week. En wanneer die ouens daar uit is hulle lekker in ons koppe, dan fokus hulle weer op Super Rugby, dan 3 of 4 weke later kry ons hulle in. So dis regtig net in terme van beleiding en beplanning dat ons almal in mekaar se koppe is.
It's a lot shorter, obviously, Rassie, than you did in English. Just about the contracting players and Regulation 9, just in a nutshell, what the plans are.
Okay, ek sal dit probeer korter sê. Ja, ek dink die groot ding is wat ons almal aanvaar het, en wat ons vir die mense daar buite moet sê is, ons kan nie meer in daai liga bat waar ons probeer kompeteer met ons exchange rate met clubs wat nie besigheidsbeginsels het aan die ander kant het. Ons kan nie, ons is nommer 5 in die wêreld. Ons kan nie spelers betaal asof ons nommer 1 en 2 in die wêreld is, veral in lande wat vir hulle geld het wat ons net eenvoudig kan nie bekostig nie. As ons by daai roete gaan bly, gaan ons 12 of 13 spelers kontrakteer, en ons hopelik met ons succession planning in place gaan ons kyk na tussen 40 tot 70 spelers, afhangende van hoeveel van die topspelers gaan aanskuif. So ek dink vir vir die volhoubaarheid van Suid-Afrikaanse rugby sal ons moet begin kyk hoe ons spelers hou en hulle groot maak. En dis maar die grondbeginsel agter die hele kontrakteringsmodel.
This last one, I see just so far with the Super Rugby, just what your impressions being the Bulls, you said they're
Yeah.
1 and 3 and
Ja, ek dink van 'n selfsugtige Springbok afrigters oogpunt is dit baie keer lekker om te sien dat die ouens bietjie meer tactics games probeer wen en nie altyd op groot oomblikke of individual X-faktorie dat ouens 'n bietjie meer die opponente uitoorlê met meer van 'n taktiese plan. Terwyl ek dit sê wil ou glad nie die individual brilliance wegvat nie, maar ek dink dis goed om te sien dat die Bulls byvoorbeeld sekere spanne net kan wurg, maar nog steeds 4 tries druk. Dis goed om te sien dat 'n game nog steeds met 20 punte gewen kan word, maar net 2 tries, maar jy weet 5 penalties. En dis goed dat die ouens se skoppersentasie so goed is, want wêreldbekers as ek selfsugtig net kan sê van 'n Springbok coach se kant af, wêreldbekers word baie keer gewen deur 'n 3 punte. Ek het net vir die ouens gesê, gaan kyk maar weet, die history repeats itself maar altyd. En spelers se dissipline in terme van 3 punte afstand, drop goals, takties, set phases, defense en dan obviously goeie attack. En ek dink hierdie jaar is daar vir my so 'n bietjie 'n shift. Dit lyk of die spanne so 'n bietjie meer takties probeer dit doen wat positief is vir my, maar obviously ons wil nog steeds daai attacking flair ook sien.
Okay, thank you very much everyone.